2025 left as quickly as it arrived, and as this chapter in the Book of Time concludes, I can't help but feel nostalgic, and as such, I've decided to reflect upon all the new Twisted Wonderland limited time events we got this year. With their joys, sorrows, frustrations, and elations all in mind, I'll be going through each and ranking their overall story, quality of the character interactions, and personal enjoyment to find the best event of 2025. Naturally, this consideration will be subjective, as my opinions on these categories is what will be weighed. But hopefully, rating these factors out of 10 will make things a bit more equitable. I'll only be rating the new events from this year since all of the encores we got this year I already ranked last year, and my thoughts haven't changed all that much. Editing Silvernoct here. I sound different because I forgot to pack my microphone for holiday travel. Rookie mistake, I know. But regardless, I completely forgot that we did in fact have 2 new encores this year, the Fairy Gala Remix and Vargas Camp 2. Unfortunately, I had already written, recorded, and blocked the audio for this video by the time that I noticed, so both encores are being added to a Wildcard section at the end, and all the standings will be rearranged afterwards. Those sections will unfortunately have this crunchy audio unless I am able to get home in time to record it, but I make no promises. Alrighty, back to the video. Since we'll be discussing the story aspect as well, there will be spoilers for the plots of every event discussed, so please consider yourselves warned. Now that we've got that out of the way, it's time to sit back, relax, and enjoy this stroll down memory lane. Our last place contender, to likely no one's surprise, is Sam's New Year Sale 2025. This event series is cute and the dynamics are fun, but they're also incredibly forgettable. I couldn't tell you what was different this year compared to last year, even if you tortured me. The formula is always the same, it's just the gimmick and featured characters that change, and you would think that this would make certain events more impactful for certain folks if their favorites are included. But this year's just didn't hit. I literally could not remember anyone other than Rook, which speaks for itself given that one of the other characters was Jade. Jade Leech. The eel, you know that guy? My brain is wired to absorb and retain anything that even looks like it could be related to Octavanel, and up until writing this script, I forgot Jade was even in this event. It is heresy of the highest accord. However, it also underscores my point. The only thing I do actually remember is Brooke's vignette, which isn't technically part of the event's story, it's a supplemental. I feel like I had similar comments and critiques of the 2024 event, and yet I can at least still tell you how Ruggy tried to swindle Colleen. I can at least tell you what Edea got in his mystery bag during the 2023 event. But this one, 2025, completely forgettable. Since I can't even remember the story, it's getting a 3, and since I can't remember 2/3 of the cast, the character interactions are also getting a 3. Given that Jade, Rook, and Ortho were involved in this event, even though I cannot remember it, I'm going to give enjoyment a 4 since I like all of them individually, and I think together they must have done something fun, and I may have liked it. Perhaps. Who's to say, honestly? In my humblest of opinions, these sales are not but silly filler. They happen during a short time frame and are only impactful during that time frame, providing no value or substance outside of it. Therefore, Sam's New Year Sale 2025 gets 10 total points and is at the bottom of the pile where it deserves to be. Next up, in 4th place, we have Radiant Reenactment, the Tangled event. From what I remember, this event was divisive for a variety of reasons, and while I agree with some of its criticism, I do disagree with the gripes about the setting. Most of the events that are centered around other Disney movies are usually tied to Halloween, and if they aren't, like with the Stitch event, there is an interdimensional element at play. But I think that the interdimensional element also divorces those movies from the world of Twist because the storybook that is the catalyst for that interdimensional travel draws a clear line between the world of Twist and the world of whatever IP is being discussed. This changed a little bit with Nightmare Before Christmas, but since Radiant Reenactment came out earlier in the year, the only true comparison some English server folks who weren't aware of or didn't want to be spoiled for the Nightmare Before Christmas event had was Stitch. This, I think, brought forth the expectation that Radiant Reenactment would follow that pattern, and when it didn't, it caused a bit of an uproar. Radiant Reenactment instead explores a scenario where the in-universe tale of Tangled is explored instead, and I think this presentation is quite refreshing. It's something new, something different, and while it means we won't be meeting Rapunzel or Flynn, I don't think that that's a bad thing. We still get plenty of references to the movie throughout, perhaps too many, and the issue we're resolving fits the characters involved well. This also ties the Tangled lore directly to the Twisted Wonderland universe, which I think works much better for a tale like this than a tale like Stitch. If Hawaii exists, then a lot of other questions are raised, but a generic fairy tale about a princess in a tower, that could happen anywhere, you know? That said, the story structure of the event is quite weak, and I think this is largely due to its pacing. We're cramming so many references in and forcing every other character on the cast to interact with our chosen boys in some way under the guise of class credit. This drags out the middle section of the story to the point where you just want it to be over, and that's not good. Everyone has their favorite boys, so when they come on screen, it's great. But then you have to sit through 6 or 5 or what have you dorms all doing similar things, one after another after another after another. This repetition could have been broken up if these scenes were interspersed throughout the day instead. And I think this would have been doable so long as Crowley establishes the extra credit a little bit earlier in the story. There is a way to write this so that it is not as repetitive and makes the interactions more organic, but that route wasn't taken. Due to this pacing issue, the story score got hit with a 4. There are good moments, and I appreciate that they took a risk in making this event something different while still referencing the source material, but the execution fell flat, so I can't rank it too much higher. Even still, I do think the character interactions are very fun, especially with our library boys. Riddle being so strict and stern, Kaleem being the complete opposite, Deuce also creating chaos despite meaning well, and Jack trying to rein things in but only in a way that suits his morals. It's just such a fun time. Plus, some of the outside character interactions were also enjoyable, like the running gag that Malleus doesn't really know how to rein in his magical power, Leona calling him out for it, Jade borrowing Vargas's costume helmet to frighten us, Jade also refusing to scooch over on the windowsill to give Azul enough room to sit, Brooke teaching us ballet and also likely recording the dancing, Edie and Ortho mistakenly taunting the group with puzzles that Riddle fully completes in 20 minutes, which is also kind of wild because we're on a time crunch, but I guess NRC gotta NRC when pride is on the line. Despite the visitation section dragging along, there is still enough enjoyment within it, I think, in the character interaction department to rank that aspect a bit higher. I at least remember the interactions, unlike a certain other event, so it definitely got points for that. Yet at the same time, I can't say that I fully enjoyed this event in an overarching sense. I get a chuckle out of remembering some of the interactions, but when I think back on the event as a whole, it just feels like a thing that happened that isn't very memorable. Perhaps it's because I don't have strong ties to the characters that were featured, or it could be due to the pacing issues, or it could even be because I don't really remember Tangled all that well. But this event just didn't impact me in any meaningful way. The most emotion it gets out of me is during Riddle's reluctance to leave the tower, but that scene also feels quite forced. Riddle does have the same hesitations as Rapunzel, he has the same rule-following behaviors, and he has a very similar mother, but it feels weird to have that revelation and those feelings appear solely during the scene and then never again. I think we might get a bit of the hesitation prior to, but my memory is telling me it's only really during the few scenes leading up to the tower escape, if it exists at all, and it's really not that much. Which is a shame because I think also people were probably expecting Riddle's character to be explored a bit more deeply in this event than it was. And I do think that it could have been nice to have seen his frustration or hesitation build up over time. However, again, the setting and place, things just didn't work out properly for that to be fully explored in a way that would have made this event more meaningful. And it's very unfortunate. So, Radiant Reenactment sits farther down on the list, but at least it's not last. Next up, in third place, we have Ville's Red Carpet Cadets, which not only gave us Eric Venue, but many humbling moments for Ace, which I very much appreciated. This story, though, is unfortunately again incredibly weak. We're involved in this event as part of Ville's entourage for a film premiere, and that premise isn't the problem, nor is the talk of luxury goods, movie memorabilia, or Ville's past. Each of these aspects are wrapped up in their own segments with one leading to the next, and this presentation keeps the event relatively low stakes. In a way, this can make the overall experience relaxing and allows much of the focus to be placed on the character interactions since there isn't much of a plot. And that would have scored the story so many more points than it did if we didn't have one little problem. When we get to the final book, to the ending, we have what I feel is an extremely forced conflict that comes out of nowhere and gets resolved rather quickly, but it's not satisfying at all. If the event was allowed to just remain a low-stakes sort of experience, then I don't think that I would have nearly as much negative emotion towards the story structure. But in a very similar way to Playful Land, I just cannot forgive it for forcing in this last minute. Oh no, the tiara can't get here in time because of traffic. The very important tiara that was ordered months in advance, that for some reason we, luxury brand that has such a respectable reputation to uphold, could never have gotten a day or two prior to ensure it would be delivered to one of our most important clients. Why wouldn't we ship this extremely important cargo on the same day that everyone and their mothers are flocking to the city? If only this could have been foreseen by anyone with a brain. And while I think there might have been some lines to address why the tiara is getting there so late at the beginning of the event, all the conflict does, at the end of the day, is force Ville's outfit to exist, and it feels really cheap since it comes out of basically nowhere. Sure, I can't remember if there is foreshadowing to the tiara being delayed or not, and there is a nice setup with Grimm and the chocolates, but outside of that aspect, there really isn't anything to make this make sense. And our sense of time gets really skewed by how they try to solve this problem, because as far as we know, we need to be at the premiere right now, but then we spend hours trying to fix Ville's outfit, and no one in this boutique parlor has any sort of brain cells. It takes Grimm being a glutton for the problem to get fixed. The whole resolution of this is just bizarre to me. The fact that it exists at all is a little bizarre to me. I don't know why they just didn't keep the curtain sleeves as a big surprise that Ville didn't want to have get out to the press before the event. And if he had told us, maybe there was a risk of that happening. Or maybe the tiara was a bait and switch, so that the paparazzi that had heard rumors were then dazzled by the big poofy sleeves that we eventually get. There could have been other ways to write this that still would have allowed Ville to get his outfit that didn't involve forcing a conflict that didn't need to be there. And it bugs me when that sort of stuff happens, because when we get to that point in the story, we know there's not that much time to resolve it. And so now we're just sucking out any of the excitement that we had had for the premiere by introducing this last hurdle. So fourth, the story is getting a 4, because there really isn't that much story, and that would have been fine, but this last-minute attempt to give it drama just does not work as it was intended to, at least in my opinion. But what the story fails to do, the character interactions make up for in spades. Since we don't have much of a plot to follow, as we do in, say, the Harvest and Sledathon, the focus shifts to the banter between characters, and that makes up the bulk of this event's enjoyment for me. Everyone in this cast is sassy. The library is open. Everyone is reading, and not a single soul is safe. It is such a delight to see them going at one another without restraint while still somehow managing to be respectful. It's just chef's kiss. We also get to learn a lot through their talk about luxury goods and animation techniques, which enhances this event too. And of course, we learn a lot about Ville's childhood from #1 suitor, Eric Venue, who is just such a delight throughout the whole dinner scene and his brief appearance at the very end of the event. Getting to meet any of the kiddos' family is the boon of the hometown events, I think. In fact, I believe it's what most people look forward to when these events pop up. And I think that the way that Eric is written is quite well done for the very little bit of him that we get to see. And it is supported by the story that we get in Book 5, Ville's flashback and the talks that he has with his dad, the characterization there is also consistent with the characterization of Eric that we get in this event. And it feels really nice to have that through line and to have that consistency. Watching the rest of the boys carefully fanboy around Eric, Ethel's spectral figure when the apples appear, Grim eating all of the chocolates always, Ace getting humbled always, Azul trying to get on Jamil's good side and constantly getting rejected, Ville being the fairest mother hen of all, even the insisting that Apple loves macarons is not only consistent with previous story beats, but also absolutely hilarious in context. Everything the characters do is amazing. It's just not quite full marks. Almost, but not quite. I think my bias against Ace and towards Eric heavily influenced the score, so to try to be a little bit more objective, I shaved off a point, but otherwise it would have gotten full marks. In terms of enjoyment, I feel the answer is rather obvious. Despite not having much of a plot and having a little verklempt ending to the story, the event has fantastic character interactions which made the overall experience lovely. Its only true flaw, truly, was that weird interjected conflict. However, unfortunately, the event has an additional detractor that has nothing to do with it specifically. The runtime of this initial event was right after the live-action remake of Snow White. I cannot say for certain, but I think that this event was inspired in part by that upcoming remake, since the movie premiere Will is attending is a remake of the in-universe Snow White movie. And I think for EN, since this event released the day after the live action, there is a risk for it to be read as a marketing attempt for the IRL movie. I wouldn't be surprised by any criticism that the event received due to that proximity. In fact, I'm pretty sure we even talked about it on stream. And while the event is separate from the remake, the timing and parallels do impact the experience. And I do think that it impacted my enjoyment too. I was reading the live action remake into certain story beats, given that Vil is twisted from the Evil Queen and it's his hometown event and the plot is surrounding a movie remake. It kind of soured it a little bit. I think this event can stand on its own 2 feet, but I also don't think it can be completely removed from the context of its release timing for this specific review. I'm curious to see how I feel about it after it reruns, but right now I do have to take a point off of enjoyability because of this proximity, leaving the event with a total of 7 enjoyability points. Overall, I think this event is great, but it does rely a bit heavily on the character discussions to propel us forward, and it undermines itself with that last-minute conflict. The story is low stakes throughout with a predictable resolution, but sometimes you need something lighter, something less dramatic. And if there was more going on, I doubt the character interactions would have been able to shine as well as they did. Even still, I think my ratings are solid, so this is where Ville's Red Carpet Cadets is going to fall in this consideration. Next up, in second place, is Trials of Rowmance, Jade's hometown event. And I gotta say, this placement was heavily influenced by my Octave and L bias, because the event itself is objectively mid. The plot is simple: go to a wedding and flip a boat. That's it. That's all we're here for, and it's all that we really do, with a tiny bit of world building in between, some nice character interactions, and some childhood stories thrown into the mix. The event is low stakes. Our time is spent focusing on the characters, and there is no last-minute conflict thrown into the mix to provide a false sense of tension, which does elevate the story over Ville's just by a little bit. Yet because of this, the event can be boring, especially during some of the more touristy sightseeing bits. However, again, I don't think that this is necessarily a bad thing. Similarly to Radiant Reenactment, I think it's nice to have something different even if it doesn't work quite as well, and the character interactions here could save things like they do in Red Carpet Cadets. Most of the other hometown events have had some sort of looming threat. In Harveston, we have the Sledathon, in Cloud Calling, we have the Bead Brawl, and in White Rabbit Fest, we have the Rabbit Run. This event series has been very formulaic, which means that it can get predictable over time, so future hometown events could become boring just off of that, and I think they tried to do something subtly different here to test the waters, following in the footsteps of Red Carpet Cadets, but removing that forced tension to see how well that could go over in the resolution. At least that is my hope for what they were doing in this event anyway, because Trials of Rowmance has a lot of the same elements, just without that overarching threat, and it allows it to feel different, but only kinda. Technically speaking, the Eternity Float ceremony is similar to the Bead Brawl, right? It's an overarching competition of sorts that we do have to tackle. However, we don't have to win it, and I think that undercuts any tension the event could have had, or investment that we as viewers could have had in the actual events of the ceremony. Flipping the boat is a personal goal of Jade's, but as established early on, flipping the boat is also a rare occurrence, with most folks getting through the trials in the boat and not in the water. When Jade does flip the boat, it's a moment of triumph. However, it's also a little hollow if you're not a big fan of Jade. The teamwork aspect of this event isn't nearly as satisfying as it is in Harveston or White Rabbit Fest, nor does it have any sort of dramatic tension like Cloud Calling did. Instead, it's a bunch of kiddos having fun, just trying to torment the bride and groom to test their love and maybe flip their boat. Which means it gets to be sillier, but as a consequence, it's also much less interesting if you aren't invested in the characters. If you like Jade, then this event is a blast, but if you don't, it's a lot of nothing. Same thing goes for Rook, Malleus, and Riddle, whose collective involvement here only bolsters Jade's chaos. They don't really do anything themselves. And while this sort of setup can be rewarding, it is very hit or miss. We learned so little about the supporting cast in this event, and I think it's really a shame. Sebek has a whole arc in Harveston. Each of the boys gets to shine in some way during Rabbit Fest. We get so many shenanigans before and during the Bead Brawl, and even in Tapis Rouge, there is so much fun dialogue between the characters that it makes up for the lacking of a serious threat. However, in Trials of Rowmance, the interaction between characters seems to only support Jade, and it does bug me a little. Malleus and Riddle are so easily manipulated by Jade during the rowing scene and other parts of the event, which ends with both of them lacking depth. Rook just pieces out for a bit and goes and does his own thing, and even when the troupe is in town, there isn't a lot of meaningful chatter between them. Jade gets to explain things, put folks into whatever situation he finds amusing, and somehow always manipulates the situation to his benefit. As a Jade enjoyer, I think this is delightful, but I also can't help but be saddened by the lack of defining moments for the rest of the cast. I cannot think of a single time during the event where anyone besides Jade does anything or says anything interesting, except for Grim. I am still so mad that Grim just took a bite out of that prosciutto. Like, I get who Grim is, but he's not that bad in other events. Even in Playful Land, there is a build-up to his tuna chopping shenanigans, but here he just enters a shop and decides to do something so nonsensical as if he's never been in a restaurant before. It's almost like the writers knew that the characters were so uninteresting that they just made Grim worse to provide any sort of comical relief, any sort of amusement, any sort of anything, because everyone else is just falling so flat. Also, the bit with the puppet show where Malleus's horns stick up into the puppet stage is very fun. I think that was really funny, but it doesn't inform us of anything new concerning Malleus and doesn't really add to him or the situation at all. We all know he's tall and that he has horns. It's a gag, a very successful one, but it doesn't do anything besides give us a little bit of a chuckle for that moment. Georgina, though, is so delightful. I loved every second she was on screen and all the things she said, even the boring things about acquiring boats. Absolute icon. Her and Jade made up the bulk of the points for the character interactions here. They were just so delightful. And that's kind of why this event is being ranked so highly. Even though the story was mid and the character interactions were, in my opinion, the worst that we've gotten in a hometown event, my love for Jade and all things Octavanel triumphed over everything. Yes, the event is unreasonably Jade-centric, but that's just what my little eel-loving heart wanted. All of the mushroom references, the chaos, the manipulation, whatever Georgina ended up doing to poor little Grim, all of it was just so delightful to me, and I had such a good time playing through this event. Even my little crash out over the puppet proprietor added to this aspect of the scoring. So with my personal enjoyment making up for the more critical aspects of this event, Rowmance lands squarely in second place. If I were to be super objective and not blinded by the eel radiance, then Jade and Vale's events would have been swapped in the ranking. But eel is love. eel is life, so I'm keeping things where they are. Our first placed winner and best event of the year, in my opinion, was Thrills vs. Chills, the Nightmare Before Christmas Halloween event. Halloween events, by their very nature, have a leg up in this particular competition because they are more methodically thought out and they tend to have a larger cast, so there is more opportunity for things to be better, but there is also a risk that things fall flat. However, in this case, I think Nightmare Before Christmas ended up being really, really good. To be honest, I didn't really enjoy this event while playing it, at least not in the beginning, because I felt like we were running around in circles for a good chunk of it, constantly switching groups while getting absolutely nothing accomplished. But in hindsight, there are so many good moments sprinkled throughout, a decent amount of character interactions, and the latter half of the event is so fun. Scully is also just a ridiculously enjoyable character, and his crisis of faith felt so good to witness and so real. The pain, the grief, the denial, the giving us candy and snacks in the bathtub so we'd be comfortable during our kidnapping, all of it was just so interesting and fun. While it took us a while to get to that point, I do think most of the event's story is enjoyable. The start is a bit slow, the constant arguing over how to do things was very annoying, and the near infinite team switches had me confused. But once the boys got into a groove of sorts, things started to go more smoothly, and the more distressed Scully became, the more interesting the plot progression was. It was like watching a firework be lit, the anticipation of the lighting, the moment of questioning once the rocket shoots up into the air but you can't really see it, and then the dazzling explosion. Most importantly, throughout the story, the characterizations of everyone involved in the event were solid and consistent. The constant group shifting was annoying, but it also lent itself well to creating unique character moments. Having a bunch of house wardens around also created a lot of tension within the group, which I think was helpful in driving parts of the plot. Plus, the Nightmare Before Christmas cast was extremely consistent with their pre-Christmas film versions. Jack was delightfully unawares of the consequences of his own actions, Sally was cunning and caring, the mayor was the mayor, and even Dr. Finkelstein being pretentious was on point. The plot's premise was rather simple, yet the way the characters interacted and caused problems for themselves created enough tension to move things along at a good pace. I did think that Scully was going to do more sabotage than he did, which was a little disappointing to me, but in the end, he was a worthwhile villain. He did cause a conflict that didn't feel last minute due to the very clear buildup of his emotions and internal struggle. The way the confrontation resolved was satisfying, and the twist that he's a literal ghost from Twisted Wonderland's past was so wild. I legitimately thought Scully was quirky. I didn't think he was an actual Victorian child, but that reveal was really fun and opens up larger implications for the storybooks going forward. Having him be Twisted Wonderland's King of Halloween, who championed for the kind of celebration the boys are used to, made the whole adventure feel worthwhile. We had an impact even if we can't remember it, and I think this also grounds the whole experience better than the resolution of, say, Stitch. We now have a lot of new questions about the purpose of these mirror books, which gives us potential to meet other historical figures or even become one ourselves. But the beginning of the event was still rough, so it did detract some points here. Similarly, the character interactions during the first few team swaps were weak to me. Everything else was fun, and I think moving folks around so that they can interact with more than just one set of characters worked very well to explore dynamics, but the execution of this concept could have been a bit better. The back half of the event was chock full of fun moments and interactions, like Trey and Jamil owning all of the cooking scenes, Leona supporting women's rights and wrongs, Riddle chasing after the one kiddo whose name I can't remember to tell him a riddle or something because of the caterpillar, every interaction Jamil had with A-Bug, Jade enjoying every single little bit of chaos, particularly when it came to his knowledge of culinary herbs, Azul trying to get literally anyone and everyone on the cast, including the Nightmare Before Christmas characters, in his debt despite this being a crisis, everyone being way too suspicious of Scully, but only for the first 5 minutes of the event, Sebek giving very Sebek advice to Scully. Every single time Sebek said et al. To refer to anyone besides Malleus just cracks me up even still. All of the Scully smooches, Leona kicking Scully through the portal back home, Trey having to mediate between Leona and Malleus, Trey getting caught lying to Leona and Malleus, Shock pulling on Malleus's horns, the mayor constantly panicking because he cannot handle NRC-flavored chaos. Even the tree conga line at the beginning was just so fun. With all of that said, I think it's rather clear why enjoyability was maxed out. There was so much happening in this event that worked so well, and even though it had a rocky start, the ending was so strong and made so much sense, I can forgive any of the detractors. Again, it really felt like our actions had weight both in Halloween Town and back in Twisted Wonderland, and I think this was very important for the success of the event. We were able to not only pull off a successful Halloween celebration, but also a successful conversion, and that's no small feat. Everything we did built up to a satisfying conclusion that maintained its tension throughout, unlike a certain fight with a fox, and while Scully got let off the hook rather easily, I think it was equally as satisfying as, say, Rollo's resolution. The punishment Malleus gives Rollo is unto his conscience, which is probably worse than Rollo going to jail for Rollo, but it is still regulated to his inner world. Scully, by contrast, receives basically no punishment because what he did for Halloween, and this logic is what Jack operates on. Because Jack operates this way, and because we as players know that we'll likely not remember the adventure when it's over, like with Stitch, the lack of consequence for Scully doesn't feel as cheap. In fact, it feels downright natural in the world of Halloween Town given who we're dealing with. Plus, the consequences of Scully's plot would have been us stuck in the book for another year and not the destruction of an entire demographic of people, so there is that too. Overall, this event was wonderful, memorable, fun, and it's left open at the end, so who knows? We may just get a fun little surprise next year after it returns. But we'll save discussion of that totally hypothetical and completely fabricated event for later, should it ever come to fruition. Because spoilers spoil everything, and I'd like y'all to be conscientious of that in the comments as well. Our first wildcard is the Fairy Gala Remix Encore, which is so much fun. I think this is a very important event for Ortho specifically, not just because he's the SSR, but because the original release was shortly after the conclusion of Book 6. This event asks many questions about what it means to be sentient, how is Ortho going to move forward, and what does it mean to evolve? Such questions are explored well by the plot, and while the resolution feels a little disingenuous, there is enough of a reason, given who is involved and how they explain themselves, for this aspect to be forgiven. The main problem presented by this story is Ortho's evolution and the limits he may need to overcome, all while the overarching problem of getting the school's mage stone back from the fairies happens in the background. I like the duality of these two issues, and it's quite important that we got something extra here in the form of Ortho, otherwise this would have been the same exact story as the OG Fairy Gala, which only concerned itself with the Mage Stone. We also get a few other folks pulled into the event in a way that feels very organic. Both Leona and Riddle do their own kinds of manipulation to involve Jack and Ace, who are essential for the stealing and subsequent getting caught bits. I forget how Silver comes about. I think it has to do with understanding the Fae or something along those lines, but even that feels natural. At the very least, these introductions are 10,000 times better than what we got in the OG. Since so many of the freshman squad are involved, we also get to see how Ortho's been integrated into the group. All the interactions we have with the kiddos are delightful. Seeing them all work together to help Ortho figure out an idea to stun Vil and the fairies, even Sebek showing up to reluctantly help, it's just so heartwarming. Silver takes a bit of a backseat, but I think this is fine given that the focus of the event is on Ortho and his journey, and I think Silver's monologue at the end justifies his presence enough anyhow. Despite being a short event, it holds a lot of weight, particularly for freshman squad enjoyers, even if Ortho isn't their favorite. And I like the more intellectual questions this ordeal poses. All these elements combined to make this event truly enjoyable, at least in my opinion. Thinking back, I have nothing but warm feelings, and I can remember almost all of its story beats, which is saying something. This event's strength truly is in its exploration of Ortho's character, and since it was so well done and so well connected to the overarching conflict, the experience just works. I'm not sure I've done a good enough job at explaining why it is getting so many points compared to the other events, but my heart just holds this little remix in such high esteem, I really can't rank it any lower. Maybe it's since the event explores philosophical concepts that really appeal to me. Maybe it's because Ortho's card art is so gosh darn gorgeous, or maybe it's because I use this clip of Silver petitioning for peace so often that I've come to have such positive connotations. But regardless, I do think this event deserves a spot up near the top. Vargas Camp 2 is also up there, but not quite as high. This follows in the footsteps of its predecessor more closely than the Fairy Gala remix, and therefore relies more heavily on the character interactions to differentiate itself. We're back in the woods again with Coach Vargas, testing our survival skills and hopefully saving our club's existence in the process. Because if we fail at any of the challenges, our arts club is as good as dead. This threat is necessary to motivate the NRC kiddos to actually participate, and it is a fun looming threat. But not a strong one, since we as an audience know that the clubs are going to be fine. We've got SSRs to profit from after all, so we can't suddenly dissolve the board game club and miss out on that sweet payout, right? This conflict does make for an interesting enough plot though, since none of the characters have the ability for that type of meta-analysis, and it's fun enough to see them come up with a plan to fight Vargas. The twist of Cruel being added as a boss in this event wasn't all that impactful the first time, and was more of a joke during the rerun, but I think it's still kind of fun, and it makes sense in Universe 2 since there is technically a risk of Vargas's plot being spoiled by the sports clubs or even us. Which is fair given that Grimm is also involved. The character interactions are where this event shines, since the audience is likely already aware of how the plot progression is going to go. However, I do think this is also where the event fails. Sure, some things are cute and there is a bit of mystery with Malleus and Lilia disappearing, but I just didn't have as much fun with them as I did in, say, Red Carpet Cadets. As an introverted artsy kid, I do appreciate the representation being fairly accurate, and the Azul literally getting sweaty to earn his outfit is one of my favorite little gags from the event. Malleus punching through rock like a Minecraft character to get that mage stone was also wild. Jade refusing to get in the water because it isn't what mountain folks would do. Edea getting caught with his extra cell phone. Grimm nearly getting eaten by a catfish. All of those moments are very fun and they do add to the event. I just don't feel strongly about them even still. And it might be because this is my second time seeing them. They just didn't quite hit the same, you know? That said, the event on the whole is really fun, and I think if you're invested in most of the characters who are in the arts clubs, then you'd really like this event. There is enough of a difference for it to stand out compared to its predecessor. Its character interactions are fun, and at the end of the day, it really didn't have to be that revolutionary, nor should it have been. What really boosted the enjoyment score of this event was the streams that we got to do of it, which really should have jogged my memory that the event happened this year, but goldfish brain, go blub blub. Anyways, y'all's reactions to certain story beats were really fun, and the goofs and gags we got to chit-chat about were also fun. So enjoyability got maxed out there. Now that we've got all the scores tallied, it's time to reorder our ranking to accurately reflect all relevant events from 2025. In the last place, we have Sam's New Year's Sale. 6th place still goes to Radiant Reenactment. 5th place goes to Vargas Camp 2. 4th place goes to Ville's Red Carpet Cadets. 3rd place goes to Trials of Rowmance. And we have a tie for first between NBC and the Fairy Gala remix. There is only one way to accurately rank them now, with a coin toss. We'll give NBC heads since Jack Skellington does his little Shakespeare thing, and tails will then go to the Fairy Gala. Game, set, match, go! Well, there you have it, folks. Fairy Gala comes out on top. I do hope y'all enjoyed my ramblings and rankings of these various events. Naturally, I'm sure you have opinions of your own, so please voice them in the comment section down below. Do you agree with my placements, or would you have ranked things differently? What was your favorite event of the year? And if you had to create a Halloween event, what would you base it on? Of course, if comments aren't your thing, you could always like and subscribe instead to show your support. And before you go, I just have to remind you that you're amazing, and I hope you have a wonderful day.